The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Route 17, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the dusty shoulder. It was one of those forgotten stretches of highway where tumbleweeds rolled lazily and the air smelled of sun-baked earth and distant rain. A small girl, no more than 7, stood alone by the roadside, her faded sundress fluttering in the hot breeze. Her name was Lily, though no one passing by would know that. She clutched a tattered stuffed bear to her chest, its button eyes staring blankly at the horizon. Tears streaked her dirt-smudged cheeks, but she forced a smile as a thunderous rumble echoed from the distance, the growl of engines, deep and unyielding, like the heartbeat of some ancient beast awakening. Earlier that afternoon, the world had shattered for Lily. Her father, a weary trucker named Jacob, had pulled over at a roadside diner for a quick meal, leaving her in the cab with the windows cracked. But when he returned, the truck was empty, and so was the lot where a group of rough-looking men had eyed them suspiciously. Whispers of trouble had followed them for miles. Jacob owing money to the wrong people, debts from a life of hard choices and harder luck. Now those men had come, their shadows looming as they dragged Jacob away into the scrubland beyond the diner, his shouts fading into the wind. Lily had hidden under the seat, trembling, until the engine's silence forced her out. Alone, with the vast desert pressing in, she waved at every vehicle that passed, her small hand a beacon of desperate hope. Most ignored her, a blur of sedans and semis speeding toward forgotten destinations. But then came the bikers. The convoy appeared like a mirage made real, 50 Harleys in tight formation, chrome gleaming under the dying light, leather vests patched with the emblem of the Iron Vow, a coiled serpent around a broken chain, symbolizing promises forged in fire. At their head rode Ethan Hale, a man whose face bore the map of old wars, a jagged scar tracing his jaw from a shrapnel kiss in some distant desert skirmish, eyes shadowed by years of unspoken regrets. Ethan wasn't the president of the club by accident. He'd earned it through loyalty that outlasted bullets and betrayals. Once a soldier who'd lost his squad to a betrayal from above, he'd sworn an oath to his fallen brothers: protect the innocent, honor the word, build a family from the ashes. The Iron Vow wasn't just a club, it was his redemption, a rolling brotherhood that chased justice on 2 wheels. As the lead bikes crested the rise, Lily's wave caught Ethan's eye. She stood there, tiny against the endless plain, her smile brave but brittle, like glass about to crack. He signaled with a gloved fist, and the convoy slowed, engines purring to a halt in a symphony of gravel crunching under tires. Dust swirled around them, the scent of hot metal and exhaust mingling with the dry sagebrush. Ethan killed his engine first, swinging a leg over the saddle, his boots hitting the ground with a solid thud. The others fanned out behind him, a wall of denim and determination, but they held back, sensing the fragility of the moment. "Hey, little one," Ethan said, his voice gravelly but gentle, crouching to her level. The wind tugged at his salt and pepper hair, and up close, Lily could see the lines etched deep around his eyes, marks of a man who'd carried too much for too long. "What's got you out here all by yourself? Where's your folks?" Lily's lower lip quivered, but she held on to that smile, as if it were the only shield she had left. "They took Daddy," she whispered, pointing toward the hazy scrubland. "Bad men. He said to be brave." Her bear slipped from her grasp, tumbling into the dirt, and she lunged for it, small fingers brushing away the grit. Ethan's jaw tightened, a flicker of something raw crossing his features, memories of his own losses, a child he'd never saved, a promise broken in the sands of war. He picked up the bear, dusting it off with care, and handed it back. "Brave, huh? That's a good word. My name's Ethan. These are my brothers. We're not the bad kind." He glanced at the horizon, where the sun bled orange into the sky, and felt that old pull, the one that had drawn him into the vow years ago. A forgotten oath stirred in his chest. To stand for the voiceless, to ride against the shadows that preyed on the weak. Behind him, the bikers dismounted quietly. Their presence, a silent vow of support. There was Marcus, the club's enforcer, his massive frame tattooed with faded military ink, who'd lost a leg in the same war that scarred Ethan. Beside him, young Tyler, fresh-faced but fierce, nursing his own secrets from a family that had cast him out. They formed a circle, not threatening, but protective. The low murmur of their voices, like a distant storm gathering strength. Lily looked up at them, her eyes wide, taking in the sea of leather and steel. You look like heroes from Daddy's stories," she said, her voice barely above the fading wind. Ethan knelt lower, meeting her gaze. "Stories are just promises waiting to be kept, kid. Tell me what happened, every detail. We're gonna make this right." As she began to speak, haltingly at first, then in a rush of fear and trust, Ethan knew this wasn't just a roadside rescue. It was a call, a thread pulling at the edges of his past, demanding he honor the oath that had rebuilt him. The convoy would ride again, not for glory, but for her, for the father vanishing into the dusk, for the justice that the law's blind eyes ignored. The desert air cooled as twilight deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky like distant campfires. Ethan stood, signaling his crew. Engines roared back to life, a chorus that vibrated through the ground, shaking loose pebbles into the dust. Lily climbed onto the back of Ethan's bike, her arms wrapping around his waist, the bear tucked safely in her lap. They didn't know it yet, but that wave, that single smiling gesture amid the terror, would bind them all in a chain stronger than steel. It would unearth secrets buried deeper than desert graves, test loyalties forged in fire, and remind a broken man that some promises were worth every scar. As the convoy pulled away, headlights cutting through the gathering dark, Ethan glanced back at the scrubland where Jacob had vanished. The bad men thought they owned the shadows, but the iron vow rode for the light, and tonight, for a little girl with a brave smile, they'd burn bright enough to guide the lost home. The rumble faded into the night, leaving only the whisper of wind over empty road. But in the distance, another engine stirred, pursuit, or perhaps alliance. Ethan's grip tightened on the handlebars, the weight of her trust heavier than any load he'd carried before. This ride was just beginning, and the gift they would bring back. It would change everything. The night swallowed the convoy whole, the Harleys slicing through the darkness like silver arrows loosed from a bow. Ethan's bike led the pack, its headlight carving a path through the inky void of Route 17, where the road twisted like a serpent uncoiled. Lily clung to him, her small body pressed against the worn leather of his jacket, the stuffed bear wedged between them like a talisman. The wind whipped past, carrying the sharp tang of creosote bushes and the faint acrid bite of exhaust. But for the first time since the diner's shadow fell over her world, Lily felt a flicker of safety. The engine's steady thrum vibrated through her bones, a lullaby of power and purpose, drowning out the echoes of her father's cries. Behind them, the iron vow stretched out in a disciplined line, 50 strong, their taillights winking like fireflies in formation. Marcus rode flank, his massive silhouette cutting an imposing shadow, the prosthetic leg he'd earned in a forgotten foxhole gleaming faintly under the moonlight. Tyler flanked the rear, eyes scanning the mirrors for any sign of trouble, his youthful grip tight on the bars, as if holding back his own ghosts. The group moved as one, a rolling fortress bound by oaths whispered over campfires and gravesides. Ethan had built this from the ruins of his old life. After the war, when command's lies left his platoons scattered like chaff in the wind, he'd vowed to his dying sergeant, right there in the blood-soaked sand, to never let the innocent pay for the powerful's greed. The vow was that promise made flesh, chrome-plated and road-worn. Lily's voice piped up over the roar, faint but clear in Ethan's ear. "Mr. Ethan, Daddy said the bad men are from the mill town. They got trucks with red stripes. He owes 'em, from when Mama got sick." Her words hung in the air, fragile against the highway's howl. Ethan nodded, though she couldn't see it, his mind racing ahead to the ramshackle outskirts of Eldridge, a dust-choked speck on the map where factories loomed like rusted skeletons. Jacob's debt, whispers of medical bills piling up like storm clouds, had drawn predators, the kind who enforced with fists and fear rather than law. Ethan's scar itched under his beard, a reminder of debts unpaid in his own past, when he'd buried brothers and buried his faith in badges. They pushed on for what felt like hours, the stars wheeling overhead in a vast, indifferent dome. The desert gave way to jagged hills, where coyotes yipped in the distance, their calls mingling with the bike's growl. Finally, Ethan signaled a pull-off at a weathered roadside outpost, a flickering neon sign reading Desert Rose Motel, its pink glow buzzing like a trapped insect. The convoy eased into the gravel lot, engines cutting to a hush that left ears ringing. Dust settled slowly, the air thick with the scent of cooling metal and blooming night jasmine from a lone bush by the office door. Ethan helped Lily down, her sneakers crunching on the pebbles as she rubbed her eyes, the bear dangling from one hand. The motel's owner, a grizzled woman named Grace with silver streaks in her hair and eyes that had seen too many sunrises, emerged from the shadows, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. She'd crossed paths with the vow before, nights when they'd rolled in after chasing shadows, leaving tips that kept her lights on. "Ethan Hale," she said, voice warm as fresh bread. "Room 7's yours. And for the little one? Fresh milk and cookies inside. No charge." Inside the dim room, lit by a single lamp casting golden pools on the faded quilt, Lily perched on the bed, nibbling a cookie that crumbled like hope reborn. The bikers gathered in the lot, forming a loose circle under the motel's awning, their voices low murmurs against the cricket chorus. Marcus unfolded a battered map on a picnic table, its edges frayed from countless rides. "Eldridge is 20 miles east," he rumbled, tracing a finger along the ink. "Those red-striped trucks belong to Harlan's crew, lone sharks with a taste for rough collection. Word is, Jacob crossed them last winter after his wife." He trailed off, glancing toward the window where Lily's silhouette danced in the light. Tyler leaned in, his face taut with the fire of the young and unscarred. "We ride in hot, we spook 'em, but if we play it smart, scout first, hit their weak spot, we get the girl her dad back without turning it into a war." Ethan stood apart, arms crossed, staring into the night where the road vanished into black. Harlan's name stirred old coals. Years back, the vow had tangled with his kind, a botched protection racket that left one brother walking with a limp. But this was different. Lily's wave, that defiant smile amid the fear, it echoed the promise Ethan had made to his lost platoon, to shield the small from the storm. He couldn't walk away. The oath burned too deep. A crackle broke the quiet, Tyler's radio sputtering to life. "Boss, got eyes on a tail. 2 trucks, red stripes hanging back 3 miles. They're pacing us." The circle tightened, hands drifting to hidden holsters, but Ethan raised a palm. No guns tonight. The vow's justice was forged in truth, not lead. "We don't run," he said, voice steady as granite. "We draw 'em out. Grace, you got that old shed out back? Stock it with what we need." She nodded, disappearing into the night, returning with chains, locks, and a crate of unmarked boxes, supplies from the vow's hidden network, tools for binding more than metal. As the moon climbed higher, casting silvery edges on the bikes, Ethan knelt by Lily's door. "We're going to find your daddy, kid. And when we do, we'll bring him something better than words." A promise kept. She smiled then, sleepy but true, her eyes reflecting the stars outside. The convoy reformed under the neon's hum, engines igniting like vows renewed. They rolled out eastward, the pursuing lights flickering in the mirrors like distant threats. But Ethan felt the shift, the pull of destiny's thread. Harlan's men thought they hunted prey. They didn't know the vow carried gifts forged in honor, ones that would shatter chains and mend broken families. The road ahead curved into uncertainty, the air alive with anticipation. Lily's trust was the spark. Now the fire would spread, testing every bond in its path. And in the heart of it all, Ethan rode not just for justice, but for the redemption that had eluded him since the war's end, a chance to save what he'd once lost. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The moon hung like a silver medallion over the twisted spine of Route 17, its pale light etching sharp contrasts on the convoy's flanks as they pushed toward Eldridge. Ethan's Harley led the charge, the engine's pulse a steady drumbeat against the night's chill, while Lily's small form nestled against him, her breathing even now in the fragile peace of motion. The air rushed past in cool gusts, laced with the metallic tang of dew-kissed sage, and the faint, oily whisper of the pursuing trucks. Two red-striped beasts lurking just beyond the taillights, their headlights bobbing like predators' eyes in the rear view. The iron vow held formation, a chain of resolve unbroken, but Ethan could feel the tension coiling tighter, like a spring wound in the silence between revs. Marcus rode point on the left, his bulk shifting with practiced ease, the wind tugging at the frayed edges of his vest, where the vow's serpent emblem caught glints of moonlight. He'd seen pursuits like this before, in the haze of desert patrols, where shadows hid ambushes, and trust was the first casualty. Tyler mirrored him on the right, his bike humming lower, younger instincts sharpening his focus as he glanced back, fingers flexing on the grips. The group had left the desert rose behind, Grace's knowing nod a quiet blessing in their wake, her shed's contents now strapped to the saddlebags. Heavy chains that clinked softly with each bump, locks forged for more than engines, and those unmarked boxes holding the vow's subtle arsenal. Not weapons of destruction, but tools of restraint and revelation, born from oaths to end cycles without spilling more blood. Eldridge emerged from the dark like a ghost town resurrected. Its outskirts a sprawl of sagging chain-link fences and hulking silos silhouetted against the starry void. The mill's skeletal frame loomed at the town's heart, floodlights casting harsh yellow pools on rusted rail tracks and stacks of weathered crates. Smoke lingered in the air from daytime shifts, a sooty veil that clung to throats and stirred memories of lost labors. Ethan eased off the throttle as they crested the final hill, the convoy slowing to a predatory crawl, engines muffled to a growl that blended with the distant hum of the mill's night crew. Lily stirred, her voice a sleepy murmur against his back. "Is that where Daddy is? The big building with the lights?" Ethan's gloved hand reached back briefly, a reassuring pat. "Close, kid. But we don't rush in blind. Promises like ours need eyes first." He signaled a split, the vow fracturing into shadows. Marcus and a handful veering toward the mill's perimeter, scouts slipping into the underbrush like wraiths, while Tyler led the rest to a concealed pull-off behind a derelict warehouse, its walls graffiti-scarred with faded warnings of debts unpaid. The pursuing trucks had peeled off minutes ago, vanishing into side roads that snaked toward the mill. Harlan's hounds reporting back, no doubt, their red stripes a beacon of impending storm. Dismounting in the warehouse's gloom, the bikers formed a tight huddle, the scent of damp concrete and stale oil grounding them. Tyler unrolled a fresh sketch from his pack, a hand-drawn map of Eldridge's veins, pieced from old rides and whispered intel. "Harlan's den is in the old foreman's office, back corner of the mill yard. Reinforced doors, guards on rotation. Jacob's likely there, tied up, roughed up from the looks of it." His voice carried the edge of restrained fury, eyes flicking to Lily, who sat on a crate nearby, clutching her bear as if it held all the answers. She'd insisted on coming, her small chin set in that same brave defiance from the roadside, and Ethan hadn't the heart, or the right, to leave her behind. Marcus grunted, rubbing his scarred knuckles. We go poetic on this. No blaze of glory. Chain their rides, box their toys. Drag the truth into the light. Harlan's crew thinks fear's their currency. We show 'em honor's the real debt. Ethan nodded, the weight of his own history pressing in. The war's betrayal, when superiors traded lives for lies, leaving him to bury the fallen under foreign skies. That scar along his jaw burned anew, a phantom ache reminding him why the vow existed, to rewrite endings, to turn predators into the pursued without becoming monsters themselves. But doubt flickered, a shadow in his chest. What if Jacob was beyond saving? What if this ride cracked the fragile family they'd built? A low whistle from the perimeter cut the talk. Marcus's scout returning, face streaked with grime, breath ragged. Spotted him. Jacob's in a side shed, hands bound. Looks like he put up a fight. Guards are sloppy, 3 outside, laughing over smokes. But Harlan's inside the main building, meeting with some suit, city type, badge shining. Corruption's thick as the smoke here. The words hung heavy, stirring the group's quiet resolve. Ethan's mind raced. A badge meant leverage twisted, justice bought and sold in backroom deals. This wasn't just a debt collection, it was a web, pulling in the innocent to feed the greedy. He turned to Lily, crouching in the dim light that filtered through cracked windows, casting her face in soft, ethereal glows. You stay here with Tyler's watch, safe as houses. We're bringing your daddy back and something more, a light to chase these shadows for good. Her eyes, wide and trusting, met his, that smile flickering like a candle in the wind, like the gift in stories, the one that makes everything better. Ethan swallowed hard, the promise sealing itself, exactly like that. The team moved out under cover of night, a silent tide flowing toward the mill. Ethan led, boots silent on the gravel, the chains in his pack a rhythmic whisper against his thigh. The air grew thicker, laced with the mill's acrid breath, chemicals and sweat. The underbelly of a town forgotten by progress. They skirted the fences, shadows merging with shadows, until the shed came into view. A squat structure of corrugated metal, lit by a single bulb, swinging lazily overhead. The guards lounged against it, oblivious, their laughter a coarse bark that masked the softer sounds within. Jacob's muffled groans, echoes of endurance. Ethan signaled, and the vow struck like precision lightning. Marcus lunged from the dark, a bear of a man moving with surgical grace, tackling the first guard into silence with a chokehold that spoke of mercy over malice. Tyler and the others followed, chains rattling softly as they bound wrists and ankles, gags improvised from bandanas to stifle cries. No shots fired, no bones broken, just the quiet efficiency of men who'd learned war's true cost. Ethan slipped inside first, the door creaking like a confession, revealing Jacob slumped against the wall, bruised, bloodied at the edges, but alive, his eyes widening in the lamplight at the sight of leather-clad salvation. "Easy, brother," Ethan murmured, kneeling to slice the ropes with a hidden blade. Jacob's face, etched with the lines of a father's desperation, crumpled in relief. The girl, Lily, she waved at us, sent us your way. Jacob's breath hitched, tears carving paths through the grime. You're the vow? God, I thought it was over." As Ethan helped him stand, the weight of unseen chains lifting, a distant shout pierced the night. Harlan's crew stirring, the suit's voice barking orders from the main building. But the vow was already retreating, Jacob slung over a shoulder, the group melting back into the dark with their prize. Engines ignited in the warehouse shadows. a controlled roar that masked their escape. Lily's face lit up as they returned, her arms enveloping her father in a hug that bridged the terror. The convoy reformed, now carrying not just a girl, but a reunited thread, speeding away from Eldridge's grasp. Yet Ethan knew the pursuit wasn't over. Harlan's web stretched further, demanding a reckoning. The gift, the true one, waited in the dawn, a symbol of promises etched in steel, ready to bind the corrupt and free the bound. As the road unspooled beneath them, the first hints of sunrise bleeding pink into the horizon, Ethan felt the old fire steady in his veins. Redemption wasn't a destination, it was this ride, this loyalty unbroken, carrying them toward a light that no shadow could eclipse. The first rays of dawn clawed their way over the eastern hills, painting the sky in strokes of rose and gold that chased the night's shadows from Route 17. Ethan's convoy thundered onward, the Harleys a synchronized beast devouring the miles, their engines a defiant roar against the awakening world. Jacob rode tandem with Marcus now, his arms slung around the big man's waist for support, the bruises on his face blooming purple in the growing light like badges of survival. Lily was back with her father, her small hands clutching his shirt. The stuffed bear, forgotten in the saddlebag, as if the real world had finally caught up to her stories. The air whipped past them, crisp with the scent of dew-soaked earth and wild sage, carrying away the mill's lingering soot like a cleansing breath. But peace was fleeting on these roads. In the mirrors, the red-striped trucks reappeared, 3 now, engines bellowing as they crested the rise behind, their headlights still on like accusatory eyes in the half-light. Harlan's crew wasn't done. The rescue had lit a fuse, and the pursuit hummed with the fury of men whose grip had slipped. Ethan glanced back, his scar pulling tight under the rising sun, a reminder of chases that ended in fire and regret. He twisted the throttle, urging the vow faster, the formation tightening into a wedge that cut through the wind. Tyler whooped from the rear, a young warrior's call to steel nerves, but Ethan felt the weight of strategy over speed. This wasn't a race to outrun. It was a lure to expose. The highway dipped into a narrow canyon, walls of red rock rising like silent sentinels, their surfaces etched with ancient petroglyphs that seemed to watch the drama unfold. Ethan signaled a feint, half the convoy veering onto a gravel access road that snaked toward an abandoned quarry, dust plumes billowing like smoke signals. The trucks followed, greedy for the trap, their tires screeching as they barreled after. Marcus's voice crackled over the radio, gravelly and sure. "Got 'em flanked, boss. Tyler's team in position." Ethan nodded to himself, the plan unfolding like a well-rehearsed oath. Draw them in, bind them with truth, not bullets. The vow had danced this dance before, turning predators' momentum against them, honoring the promise to end threats without becoming them. In the quarry's bowl, a vast scar in the earth ringed by jagged cliffs, the bikers dismounted in a fluid cascade, bikes forming a barricade of chrome and resolve. The truck skidded to a halt at the rim, doors slamming as 6 men spilled out. Harlan's enforcers, faces twisted in snarls, hands hovering near belts where tools of intimidation glinted. At their head stood Harlan himself, a wiry figure in a stained duster, his eyes narrow slits under a battered hat, flanked by the suit from the mill. A city official named Victor Lang, his badge a false shield polished to gleam in the dawn. Lang's presence twisted the knot tighter. Corruption incarnate, the kind that traded justice for payoffs, burying families like Lily's under mountains of fabricated debt. "You think you can just ride in and play heroes?" Harlan spat, his voice echoing off the rocks like a hollow threat, boots crunching gravel as he advanced. The air thickened with tension, the scent of hot rubber and sweat mingling with the mineral tang of the quarry floor. His men fanned out, postures aggressive, but Ethan's crew held ground. A circle of quiet strength around Jacob and Lily, who peeked from behind her father's legs. Her earlier smile now a flicker of wide-eyed wonder at the unfolding standoff. Ethan stepped forward, hands open, the sun catching the serpent patch on his vest like a living emblem. "We're not playing, Harlan. We're keeping a promise." Jacob's debt? It was to help his wife fight her illness, not fuel for your racket. "And you," he turned to Lang, voice steady as the canyon's walls. "Your badge doesn't buy silence here. We've got recordings from the mill, your voice sealing deals in the dark. The vow doesn't forget." Lang's face paled, a crack in the facade, as Tyler held up a small device, its screen glowing with time-stamped audio snatched during the scouts' infiltration. Snippets of bribes, threats veiled as arrangements, enough to unravel the web without a single raised fist. Harlan lunged, fury boiling over, but Marcus intercepted with a bear hug that pinned him like a vice, chains from the saddlebags clinking as they secured wrists, tools of restraint, not harm. The enforcers hesitated, the fight draining as the truth hung in the air, poetic justice unfolding in the morning light. No shots, no blood, just the weight of exposure heavier than any blow. Jacob stood taller now, supporting himself without Marcus's aid, his eyes meeting Ethan's in a nod of profound gratitude. "You didn't just save me," he murmured, voice rough from the night's ordeal. "You gave us a future." Lily tugged at her father's hand, looking up at the bikers with that brave smile reborn, the canyon's echoes amplifying her whisper. "They're the good ones, Daddy, like in the stories." As the sun crested fully, bathing the quarry in golden warmth, the vow loaded Harlan's crew into their own trucks, bound for the nearest outpost, where anonymous tips would ensure real law took over, not the crooked kind. Lang sat silent, defeated, his badge a tarnished trinket in his lap. Ethan watched them drive off under escort, the red stripes fading into dust, then turned to his brothers. The ride back would carry more than escape. It carried redemption, a thread mending the tears in souls long frayed. But the true gift waited at the convoy's heart. From a concealed compartment in Ethan's bike, he pulled a small wrapped bundle, crafted in secret over miles of road. A custom pendant on a sturdy chain, a tiny silver serpent encircling a blooming flower, symbol of the vow's protection, promises that bloomed from broken ground. He knelt before Lily, the metal warm in his calloused palm. "This is for you, kid. Wear it. And know my brothers and I ride for you always. A family chosen, unbreakable." Her eyes sparkled as she clasped it, the chain draping like a vow sealed. Jacob's hand rested on Ethan's shoulder, a silent pact forming. The engines roared to life once more, the canyon reverberating with their departure, carrying not just survivors but a legacy of honor etched in the dawn. Yet Ethan sensed the road's whispers, loose ends from Lang's network, shadows that might yet pursue. The vow's justice was aflame. It warmed, but it also drew moths. As they crested the canyon's edge, the world unfolding vast and hopeful below, Ethan gripped the bars tighter. The gift was given, but the promise endured, pulling them toward horizons where loyalty faced its deepest tests. If this story's touching your heart, hit that like button below. The highway unfurled like a ribbon of faded hope under the midday sun, its asphalt shimmering in waves of heat that distorted the horizon. Ethan's convoy cut through it with purposeful rhythm, the Harley's engines a low, harmonious growl that blended with the wind's sigh across open plains. Lily rode with Jacob now, her father's arms a protective cage around her, the silver pendant glinting at her neck like a captured star, a talisman of the vow's vow, its serpent and flower etched with the quiet promise of guardians on the road. The air rushed by, carrying the clean scent of sun-warmed grass and distant pine, a balm after the quarry's dust and deceit. But Ethan's mirrors told a different story. A lone black sedan, sleek and anonymous, trailing at a discreet distance, its tinted windows hiding eyes that watched too closely. Lang's network, unraveling but not broken, had sent a hound to sniff out the scent of unfinished business. Marcus rode abreast of Ethan, his massive frame leaning into the curve of the road, the wind tugging at the loose threads of his vest. Over the radio's crackle, his voice rumbled like thunder on the edge. "That sedan's been pacing us since the canyon. Not Harlan style. Too clean, too official. Lang's cleanup crew betting on it." Ethan nodded, the scar on his jaw pulling taut as he scanned the endless stretch ahead. The rescue had been clean, poetic even, with Harlan's men handed off to impartial hands at a border outpost, their threats dissolving like mist in the morning light. But Victor Lang's badge carried deeper rot, ties to City Hall, whispers of rigged contracts that funneled debts into private pockets, crushing folks like Jacob under the weight of fabricated ledgers. Exposing him had cracked the facade, but cracks let in light, and sometimes backlash. Jacob's voice broke through from behind, strained but steady, carried on the breeze. "I never meant for this to touch her," he called, his words laced with the gravel of exhaustion. Lily turned her head, pressing closer to him, her small hand tracing the pendant's curves. "Daddy, they're our friends now, like the iron vow in your trucker tales, the ones who ride for the lost." Her innocence cut through the tension, a reminder of why they pressed on. Ethan had seen that light in his own past, fleeting glimpses amid the war's haze, when a child's drawing from home kept a squad going through the unrelenting sand. It was that spark he'd vowed to protect, forging the vow from the embers of betrayal. Now, with Lily's trust woven into their chain, failure wasn't an option. It would shatter more than metal. The convoy veered north onto a secondary route, narrower and flanked by rolling hills dotted with weathered ranches, their fences sagging like tired shoulders. The sedan's pursuit grew bolder, closing the gap as the road twisted into a series of blind curves. Ethan signaled a slowdown, the bikes easing into a defensive cluster, engines idling to a purr that vibrated through the ground like a warning heartbeat. Dust swirled in lazy eddies, the scent of dry earth and wild thyme rising as they pulled onto a gravel overlook, tires crunching to a halt. The black sedan slowed too, parking at a respectful distance, its door opening with a soft click that echoed in the sudden quiet. Out stepped a woman in a crisp pantsuit, her heels sinking slightly into the gravel as she approached. Mid-40s. Sharp features softened by a badge clipped to her lapel, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. No gun visible, but her posture screamed authority, the kind bought with favors and files. "Mr. Hale," she said, voice cool as the shadow she cast, stopping just beyond arm's reach. "Internal Affairs, name's Detective Elena Reyes. We need to talk about Eldridge and Lang." The vow tensed, hands drifting to sides, but Ethan raised a gloved palm, holding them steady. Her eyes flicked to Lily and Jacob, a flicker of something human. Regret, perhaps, crossing her face before stealing again. Ethan dismounted, boots hitting the ground with a solid thud, the sun warming the leather of his jacket. "Talk fast, detective. We've got a family to deliver home." The air hung heavy, laced with the faint ozone of an approaching storm, clouds gathering on the western edge like unspoken doubts. Reyes glanced at her sedan, then back, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "Lang's not alone. He's got pull, senators, lenders, the works. Your little stunt in the quarry, audio's gold, but it'll draw heat. They're painting you as vigilantes, the vow as a gang with a grudge. Jacob's debts? They're calling it fraud now, pinning it on him to bury the real trail." Jacob stiffened behind Ethan, his grip tightening on Lily, who peered out with wide eyes, the pendant catching a ray of light like a beacon. "Fraud? That money went to keep my wife breathing, treatments the system wouldn't touch. Harlan twisted it, and Lang signed off." Reyes nodded, pulling a slim folder from her jacket, its pages crisp against the dusty air. I know. I've been chasing this web for months. Lost a partner to it last year. Accident. On a routine stop. But I need more than whispers. Ride with me to the state line. There's a safe house, neutral ground. Hand over the recordings, and I'll make sure Jacob and the girl walk clean. No loose ends. Doubt coiled in Ethan's chest, a familiar serpent from war rooms where alliances shifted like sand. Reyes's badge gleamed, but so had Lang's, and trust was a debt paid in blood. Marcus leaned in, his breath hot on Ethan's ear. Could be a setup, or a bridge. Your call, boss. Tyler, ever the firebrand, muttered from the flank. We ride our own road, but for her. He nodded toward Lily, whose smile had faded, replaced by a quiet plea in her gaze. The vow's oath pulsed, protect the innocent, honor the word, but this was a crossroads where loyalty tested its own chains. Ethan met Reyes's eyes, searching for the fracture in her armor, the human beneath the suit. Why us? Why now? She hesitated, the wind rustling papers in her folder, then sighed, a sound heavy with years of compromises. Because I made a promise once, to that partner, to end this rot without losing more souls. You're not the monsters, they say. That girl waving on the roadside, it reached my desk. Anonymous tip from one of your own. Changed my view. The words landed like a key turning in a lock, unlocking a fragile alliance. Ethan glanced at his brothers, the circle of faces etched with the scars of chosen family, then back to Jacob, whose nod was weary but resolute. All right, Ethan said finally, voice firm as forged steel. We ride together, but if this sours, the vow doesn't forget. Reyes exhaled, a tension easing from her shoulders as she returned to her sedan. The convoy reformed, engines igniting in a cascade of power. The black car slotting into their formation like a reluctant thread in the weave. As they rolled out, the hills giving way to broader plains, Lily's voice piped up again, clear over the roar. Mr. Ethan, is she a good one too? He chuckled, the sound rare and warm, glancing back. Hoping so, kid. Promises are testing us all today. The storm clouds thickened, thunder rumbling in the distance like a distant drum, mirroring the unease in Ethan's gut. The safe house loomed in his mind, a potential haven or a trap. But with Lily's light leading the way, the vow pressed on, their bonds tightening against the gathering dark. Redemption's road was never straight. It twisted through doubts and deliveries, demanding every ounce of honor to see it through. And as the miles blurred, Ethan felt the old fire steady, pulling them toward a dawn where justice might finally break free. The thunderheads rolled in like uninvited guests, their underbellies bruised purple against the vast prairie sky as the convoy merged with Reyes's sedan on the winding stretch toward the state line. Ethan's Harley led the pack, its chrome flanks catching erratic flashes from distant lightning, the air now heavy with the electric promise of rain and the faint, earthy petrichor rising from the soil. Lily's laughter bubbled up sporadically, a silver thread cutting through the engine's growl as she pointed out shapes in the clouds from her perch behind Jacob. Dragons, maybe, or the vow's serpent come to life. But Ethan's focus stayed sharp on the mirrors, the black sedan, a steady shadow in their wake, its tires humming a cautious rhythm on the asphalt scarred by years of heavy loads. Marcus flanked Ethan, his bike dipping low into the curves, the wind whipping at the loose ends of his bandana like flags of defiance. Over the radio, Tyler's voice crackled from the rear. "Road's clear ahead, boss. No tails beyond her, but these clouds. Gonna turn this into a mudslide if we don't push." Ethan grunted acknowledgement, his gloved hands firm on the grips, the scar along his jaw throbbing faintly with the building pressure. Trusting Reyes was a gamble, like handing your six to a stranger in the fog of war, necessary but laced with the bite of old betrayals. The folder she'd shown them at the Overlook painted a damning picture. ledgers of laundered funds, Lang's signature twisting debts into nooses for the desperate, all funneled through Harlan's mill like poison in a vein. Jacob's story was just one thread in a tapestry of ruined lives, and the vow had unwittingly tugged at its edge. The safe house appeared as a squat cabin nestled in a copse of wind-bent pines, its weathered siding blending into the gathering gloom like a secret kept too long. Rain began to patter as they pulled in, fat drops splattering the gravel lot and turning the earth to slick clay underfoot. Engines cut to silence, leaving only the steady drum on the tin roof and the sizzle of wet leather. Reyes emerged from her car, umbrella in hand, her pantsuit now dotted with moisture, but her expression held a resolve that mirrored the storm's intensity. "Inside," she said, voice cutting through the downpour. "We've got company waiting. My contact from the State Bureau. Clean, off the books. No Lang influence here." The cabin's interior was sparse but warm. A single room lit by a flickering lantern that cast dancing shadows on knotty pine walls. A pot of coffee bubbled on a hot plate, its rich aroma mingling with the damp scent of rain-soaked wood. Jacob settled Lily on a threadbare couch, wrapping her in a wool blanket that smelled faintly of pine needles and old campfires, her pendant catching the light as she nestled against him. The bikers formed a loose perimeter, Marcus by the door like a sentinel oak, Tyler pacing with restless energy, his eyes flicking to the windows where rain lashed the glass in sheets. Ethan stood at the table, unfolding the audio device, its screen glowing with the incriminating voices, Lang's smooth baritone sealing fates over clinking glasses. Reyes's contact arrived minutes later, a sturdy man in a rumpled trench coat named Harlan, no relation to the shark, his weathered face bearing the honest lines of a cop who'd chased shadows without compromise. He shook hands all around, his grip firm but unthreatening, eyes lingering on Lily with a softness that eased the room's tension. "Heard about your roadside angel?" he said to Ethan, nodding toward the girl. "Waves like that. They ripple farther than you know." As they pored over the evidence, voices low and urgent, the storm outside raged, a howling wind that rattled the shutters like impatient fists. Jacob recounted his tale, the words tumbling out in the safe harbor of truth. The wife's fading fight against illness, the loans taken in desperation, Harlan's twist into extortion, Lang's rubber stamp burying it all under layers of forged paperwork. Ethan watched it unfold, the pieces locking into place like gears in a long-stalled engine. His own ghost stirred, the sergeant's dying breath in the desert, promising protection for those left behind, a vow that had birthed the iron vow from the wreckage of Command's lies. This was its echo, not just saving one family, but striking at the root, honoring the innocent with actions that echoed louder than thunder. Reyes played the recordings, Harlan the cop's face hardening with each damning phrase, his pen scratching notes on a pad that would ignite investigations across state lines. "This ends it," he declared, voice steady as the cabin's beams. "Lang's network crumbles by week's end. No more shadows preying on the vulnerable. Jacob, your slate's clean, debts reclassified, restitution from the pot they skimmed." Lily's eyes widened, her small hand slipping into Ethan's as the adult's words wove a tapestry of justice. "Does that mean the bad dreams are over, Mr. Ethan, like the gift you promised?" He knelt, the floorboards creaking under his weight. Rain drumming a celebratory rhythm overhead. From his vest pocket, he drew the final token, a duplicate pendant, larger for Jacob, its silver serpent coiling protectively around the flower. "This one's for you both. Wear it as a reminder. The vow rides for promises like yours. Family isn't blood. It's the ones who stand when the storm hits." Jacob clasped it, his calloused fingers trembling. Tears mixing with the cabin's humid air. "You gave us more than freedom. You gave us hope, rebuilt." As the storm broke into a steady pour, washing the plains clean, the group shared a quiet meal. Canned stew heated over the hot plate, its warmth seeping into bones chilled by the ride. Laughter crept in, Tyler regaling Lily with tales of road adventures stripped of their grit, Marcus adding gruff chuckles that rumbled like aftershocks. Reyes lingered, her alliance sealed in the shared silence, a bridge from badge to brotherhood. Harlan the cop departed first, folder under arm, promising updates that would bind the corrupt without breaking the just. By evening, the rain eased to a mist, the sky clearing to reveal stars punching through the clouds like affirmations. The convoy rolled out under a rainbow's faint arch, the sedan trailing one last time before veering toward official channels. Jacob and Lily headed homeward with a vow escort, the miles melting into normalcy. Their truck waiting at a secure lot, debts dissolved like mist in the sun. Ethan rode last, the wind drying his jacket, the weight of redemption settling light on his shoulders. The little girl's wave had started it all, a smile amid fear that pulled oaths from the dust. Harlan's web lay in tatters, Lang's empire exposed, the vow's justice a quiet legend whispered on highways. In the distance, the horizon glowed with twilight's promise, a new road unspooling for the brotherhood. Ethan glanced back at Lily's waving hand, smaller now, but no less bright, and felt the serpent emblem on his vest warm against his chest. Promises endured, families chose their paths, and in the heart of it, honor rode eternal. A gift no shadow could steal. Thank you for riding along on this journey of promises kept and hearts mended. If these stories of quiet courage resonate with you, please subscribe for more tales from the road where loyalty lights the way.